This video will discuss 3 ways that you can use some comma rules to help you get control over the commas in your sentences. As I've been reviewing your drafts, I'm finding a ton of comma problems, and so the information in this video will help you address those and correct those as you edit your drafts before you submit your final portfolio. It's important to take a step back first and think about why we use commas or when we put them in automatically. Often students will say that they put a comma in when there's a pause. And while that's true, that's not always the case. And so it's helpful to know the exact rules and what to do when you need a specific comma. So there's 3 things that I'm going to cover and 3 ways that commas are used. The first is to link 3 or more items in a series. The second is to separate introductory clauses from the rest of the sentence. And the third is to connect 2 independent clauses. Now, I know I just threw a bunch of grammar terms out there, but I'll explain, so hang on. So the first item, linking 3 or more items in a series or list, is what's called an Oxford or serial comma. And we put commas in these sentences because it offers clarity for the reader. So take a look at this example. The candidate offered lower taxes, higher spending, and universal happiness. We add those commas because there's 3 or more items in a list, and we want to separate each of those items. So add that comma in, make sure that you're remembering to do that because it helps for clarity for the reader. The second strategy is to separate introductory clauses from the rest of the sentence. An introductory clause is a phrase that can't stand alone as a sentence. It's not a complete thought. The introductory clause introduces the main idea of the sentence, and it often comes at the beginning of the sentence. So in this example, we see, according to the voters, turnout was higher at the polling places. So we can't have according to the voters as its own sentence, but we want to connect it to the sentence that follows. We use a comma to do that. Another example, even though it was beautiful, Americans chose to stand in line to exercise their right to vote. So again, it's establishing the conditions of the sentence. It was beautiful outside, but that alone can't stand as a sentence, and so we have to connect it to the sentence that follows with a comma. The third way to use a comma is to connect 2 independent clauses. So we know that an independent clause is basically a sentence, and we know that a sentence has a subject, which is a noun, usually a person, place, or thing, a verb, which is the action of the sentence, and an object, which is a noun that receives the action of the sentence. So some examples: the voters, the subject; elected, the verb, that's what they did; the object, the next representative. So the voters elected the next representative, complete sentence because it has a subject, verb, and an object. Here's another example. The city was happy with the result. Subject, verb, object. 2 complete sentences there. If we wanted to join those together, there's 3 different ways that we could actually do that. The first way is to use a comma and a conjunction to join them. So the voters elected the next representative, comma, and the city was happy with the result. You could also use a semicolon to join them. The voters elected their next representative, semicolon, the city was happy with the result. And finally, you can do something a little bit more sophisticated, which is to use a semicolon, a transition word, and a comma. So we have the voters elected the next representative, semicolon, meanwhile, comma, the city was happy with the result. So all 3 of those examples illustrate how to connect 2 independent clauses into one sentence. Using a comma alone is not strong enough, so you need one of these 3 options to do that. So I'd suggest that you work on trying to avoid common comma errors. The first one that I've been seeing a lot of is the comma splice, and that's when you're using a comma to combine 2 independent clauses, 2 sentences that could stand alone by themselves, but you're combining them, but you're only using a comma to connect them. So in this example, the voters elected the next representative, the city was happy with the results. A comma is not strong enough to join them. And so instead, you should add a conjunction after the comma, you should replace the comma with a semicolon, or you can replace the comma with a semicolon, transition word, and comma. The second common error that I'm seeing a lot of are run-on sentences, and that's when you have too many independent clauses, those are complete sentences, that are joined with commas. That's incorrect. So let's look at this example. If you're correcting for this, for run-on sentences, if you want to make sure that you don't have run-on sentences, the first step is to identify the independent clauses and then punctuate them correctly. So we see 3 independent clauses in this sentence. The voters elected the next representative, the city was happy with the results, and we experienced a long period of peace and prosperity in our community. So because each of those underlined pieces are independent clauses, a comma should separate them. So we add a comma after the first independent clause, and then we add a comma after the second independent clause. As you work on revising your essays, please proofread for common comma errors. So look for your introductory clauses and check, do you have a comma after the introductory clause? If not, add one. Look for lists of items. Do you have 3 or more items in a list? If so, are they separated by commas? And finally, look for independent clauses that you're joining together with only a comma. Is the punctuation you use strong enough to join them? If not, add something else. Add a comma in a conjunction, add a semicolon, or add a semicolon, transition word, and comma.